Dominance, pure dominance. What a second half for the BYU men's basketball program as they rout Cincinnati, win their second straight, and more importantly, get back to 500 in Big 12 play. It appears, based on what we just saw, BYU might be rounding into form at just the right time.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And more importantly, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Special edition postcast here as we recap BYU's 80-52 rout of the Cincinnati Bearcats Saturday night. And not going to lie, what a tale of two halves. First half, an absolute slog. Cincinnati mucked this game up. Use that term because that's exactly what it was in the first half. BYU really had quite a slog as they were struggling on the boards. And then BYU comes out in the second half, and the first thing, was it 10 minutes and change? They'd scored 28 points in the entire first half. In the first half of the second half, if that makes sense, BYU scores 30 points and just absolutely runs away from the Cincinnati Bearcats. Really impressive stuff from Kevin Young and company. And I got to say, is Jager Demin waking up at just the right time? 15 points, and I'm not going to lie, the three just before halftime. Remember, he scored the final 5 points of that first half, two free throws that looked very, very good. Then he hits a big-time three just before the halftime buzzer. And I'm not going to lie, that shot to me screams to me that Jager might be finding his range once again. He ends up shooting, like I said, 15 points is what he shot, 3 of 5 from the field, 3 of 5 from the three-point arc. More importantly, 6 of 7 from the free throw line. A lot of the numbers really good for BYU across the board. For the game, shooting 57.1%, 62.5% from three, and 81.8% from the free throw line. Those numbers are absolutely dominant, especially when you compare to what Cincinnati had. Just 37.7% from the field, 17.9% from the three-point arc, 5 of 28. They actually shot more threes than BYU, and just 25% on their free throws. Now, they only got 4 free throws versus 11 for BYU, the officials in this game. Then we go through almost the entire first half. I think Egor actually had the very first free throws of the game for BYU, and that came with a minute to go in the first half. So pretty stingy night from the officials with regards to calling fouls, free throws, but I actually really kind of appreciated the free-flowing nature of this game. Call me crazy. We had a combined 29 fouls in this game. Much better. I hate games where you average more than a foul a minute. We have seen a bevy of those with BYU this season, but that's beside the point. Really impressive stuff from BYU. And if Jager Demin, if he is finally waking up and his shot is starting to return for BYU, like we saw that first month of the season, get ready for some fun times, folks. Now, let's also acknowledge a spade for a spade. Cincinnati and Colorado, the two teams that BYU beat this past week, are the bottom tier of the conference. They are the teams that you are supposed to beat if you're the BYU Cougars. But I don't think BYU can take anything for granted right now. They're back at 500 in conference at 4-4. They're 13-6, and they should be feeling pretty good about themselves. But the path gets a whole lot harder going forward as Baylor comes to town on Tuesday night. You look at it and you're like, okay, here we go. So at home against Baylor on Tuesday night, then you're at UCF on Saturday, which, by the way, the Knights are now going to be a Q1 game as BYU goes down to Orlando. Oh, and then the following week, there's some school named Arizona, the Wildcats. Yeah, they come to Provo. So it's going to get really hairy here for BYU, but I reiterate, if Jager Demin is waking up offensively, that could unlock BYU and really make them a massive force in this back half of the conference season. Now, they got 12 games to go, and the whole goal for BYU, if they want to punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament on this back half, you got to go 500. If you can get to 10-10 or, heaven forbid, 11-9 in conference, that should be good enough with the Q1 wins you would have accumulated along the way there to get you into the NCAA tournament. Jager Demin, if he is actually what we saw against Cincinnati is legitimate and his shot is coming back around, everything else that he offers, his playmaking ability, his effort on defense, his ability to tee his teammates up with finding them in good spots to make really high percentage shots, BYU offense could be looking a lot sharper and a lot better going forward. And that doesn't even belie what Richie Saunders offered in this game. Richie is going to be an all Big 12 honoree if he continues to play at the pace he is at. He is shooting lights out from three in particular, had a really dominant night tonight. Speaking of the game against Cincinnati, he was 7 of 15 from the field overall, 5 of 7 from three. Just absolutely insanity what we're seeing from Richie right now. And the crazy thing is 32 minutes, he is showing that he is a force. I remember questioning early this season if Richie, what he was showing offensively was sustainable. Because remember, he's been this lovable sixth man who's a kind of a linchpin of what BYU wants to do. No, he is legitimately maybe the best offensive weapon BYU has, and I'm including Egor Demin in that conversation. What Jager offers, if he can get 10 points per game, that's good enough because his ability, he got 7 assists to lead BYU once again tonight, 5 rebounds and 15 points. That's a stat line that's going to have NBA scouts saying, all right, is he finally emerging from his slump that he was in? Because he was mired in a really deep slump. But Richie Saunders has absolutely come alive, and he's a big reason why BYU is still afloat in the conference. And I say afloat because they're at 500. They're not a dominant force in the conference right now. If you want to look at dominance, look at what Houston's doing, for example. But the bigger point to be made here for BYU is they don't have to be dominant. They just have to compete every single game, bring everything they've got to bear, and it should help them out. I also really liked what I saw from Dawson Baker in this game, 11 points off of the bench, 5 of 7 from the field overall. Dawson continues to find really good spots to attack opposing defenses. He's never going to beat guys off the dribble. He's not going to be a guy who's going to force his way to the rim. But what he is a crafty scorer of the basketball. And that's all BYU needs from him. So I really do like what I saw from BYU in this game. Defensively, I thought they were really cohesive, especially in that second half. They came out on an absolute tear. Now, the offense obviously demoralized Cincinnati. That's the Cincinnati team that they made things tough for BYU in the first half. And BYU came out and said, you know what? Let's ratchet it up. Let's turn up the intensity. And that's exactly what they did. And they just ran away and hid. I really was impressed with BYU, particularly in that second half. It was pure dominance. I use that in the open of this podcast because that's as dominant a half as BYU's had probably all season. I don't say that lightly because they've had some pretty good halves. Remember, we were talking at one point in the season that BYU, if games were just 20, maybe 30 minutes long, they'd be a pretty dang good basketball team. Well, they're starting to show now 40 minutes. They can put it together for the full 40 minutes, and it sure looks like this team, based on the way that they played this week, going to Colorado and winning that game, and more importantly, coming back home and getting through a really tough first half and then just absolutely running over Cincinnati in the second half of this game, shows to me that this BYU team very well might be rounding into form at the perfect time because, once again, the path gets significantly harder here. Greg Wrubell put it out earlier this week. I think it's changed a little bit. In these final 12 games of Big 12 play, BYU will face 10 and maybe 11 at this point, 11 Q1 games of their final 12. And I think the other one is a Q2, maybe. So it doesn't get easier for BYU, but if what we have seen from them, the signs of life, if you want to call it that, from this BYU basketball team, particularly what we saw from Jager Demin in this game, if all of that is legitimate, if that's replicable and it can be absolutely transferred to their next game or games coming up, this BYU team might very well have some life and have some juice to make a run at the NCAA tournament. And I, for one, would love to be covering that all along the way. All right, so there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this special edition postcast. I want to take up a ton of time, but a big win for BYU, 4-4 in the conference, and right back in the thick of things when it comes to their chances of making the NCAA tournament. But from here, once again, it only gets tougher. So BYU, they got to get tougher themselves and show that they are a team that can learn from their previous mistakes and get rolling here. That's what they can do. Hey, March might be a lot more fun for BYU basketball than we may have been thinking about a month ago when it comes to the Cougars. All right, we'll have more for you guys on our full edition Monday talking about this one. We'll also preview the game against Baylor on Tuesday night. Really intriguing opponent in the Bears. They kind of been up and down all season long, but much like BYU, got a lot of young talent that's got NBA aspirations. Could be an interesting matchup, but we'll break that down on our Monday and Tuesday editions of the podcast. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And once again, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.